Good morning everyone and welcome to Liverpool Chamber of Commerce's latest event in our series looking at the future of the Liverpool City region's economy. Today's session is brought to you live from the MSP studio in Bootle, and I'm really pleased to say that we've got a really well-informed and exciting panel to talk about Brexit and the future of international trade implications for Liverpool and Liverpool City region's future development. The UK left the European Union officially at the end of 2020, and it's fair to say the bedding in process of the new arrangements have certainly been interesting for a number of businesses, and certainly as a Liverpool Chamber, we've been at the coalface of speaking to businesses on a daily basis about their challenges. In a very short time, I'm going to be speaking to our International Trade Manager, Elena Enciso, and she will be giving an insight into some of the specific challenges that our local businesses have faced. We'll then introduce our panel, who will talk from their perspectives about what Brexit and international trade means to them, their sector and their clients. So, welcome to the session this morning. And we'll start straight away by, introducing Elena as our International Trade Manager. And we'll talk to her a little bit about what the experience of Liverpool Chamber members has been. Once I've spoken to Elena, I'll then introduce you to our other panellists, and then we'll open up the discussion. So Elena, it's been undoubtedly an incredible period of time for businesses, both in the run-up to Brexit and also in this implementation period since the withdrawal agreement was agreed. What kind of inquiries has the Liverpool Chamber been receiving from businesses over the last few weeks and months?
Thank you, Paul. We certainly have had a high volume of inquiries from members since January. I'm going to focus on four of the most frequently questions that have been covered. They are around customs declarations, about Incoterms, about VAT, and about rules of origin. So, for instance, for the customs declarations, most of the queries are around the content that go in each of the boxes. What CPC code should I put? Can you help me to find the clearing agent in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland? Or can you help me to find the customs broker? Regarding the Incoterms, as you know, because the trading rules have changed with Europe, many customers in the continent are asking our exporters to use DDP. Most of the queries come as, can I use an alternative Incoterm? Can I use a variant that will help me to avoid the payment of tax at the other end? That type of thing. When it comes to VAT, our exporters and importers are now having to pay import VAT on all the imports that they have from the continent. They didn't have that before. So they need to realize that they can reclaim the cost of that VAT and they can use postponed VAT accounting. When they export, now they don't have to charge VAT because VAT is a consumption tax, so the goods are exported, no VAT applies then. There are lots of questions around this issue, and we always try to refer our companies to professionals for advice. Finally, origin is being one of the most kind of controversial questions that we have got, because the headline said this trade cooperation agreement is given no duty, no quota. It doesn't really happen. To understand the rules of origin is trying to simplify a very complex question. I will try my best. Each trade agreement has different rules of origin, and the rules of origin matter because they are the condition for a tariff-free agreement. Some countries, like for example Japan, Turkey, Singapore, and the European Union, ask companies to self-certify the origin of the goods in the commercial invoice by including a statement of origin. Many queries come about this statement of origin. What is the exact wording? Where do I find it? Other companies they ask about the UK EUR1 and they get confused. They think that's the document that is required to export their goods. With European Union countries, you only need to self-certify the origin. But to qualify for preferential rate of duty, your goods needs to be of European or UK origin. If they aren't, you can get duty-free. To put an example, if you bring rice from Italy and you want to export this rice to Germany without doing anything to the rice, it won't qualify for duty-free. you need to convert it into a ready-made meal, you need to change their tariff heading, you need to add value to the goods. That creates problems for many companies that import goods from, say, Japan or from other European countries, don't process them. They act as a distribution center in the UK. Prior to Brexit, they didn't have to pay any duty. They would be in free circulation, but now they have to work out the origin of their goods, add the values, and that can be quite a complex issue. So those are four of the main issues I've been dealing with, to name a few of them.
So, Elena, it's effectively a case of the technical rules that are impacting on the ability of organisations to transfer goods across borders, and it's the increasing costs, which we hear about a lot in the media and spoken of generally. But these are very, very legitimate and tangible challenges that businesses are facing and coming to you and chambers and others to try and get an understanding about how they deal with them.
Very much so, definitely.
So what is it that companies are doing fundamentally differently now to what they were doing previously, prior to the free trade agreement?
Well, we have to understand that we have left the most ambitious form of trade cooperation. We have left the single market and the customs union. Now companies need to learn to navigate trade with 27 markets in a different way. All of a sudden, they have this documentary and regulatory requirement that they didn't have before. There are additional barriers to trade. To name a few examples, a company exporting wild bird food to Ireland now needs an export health certificate, a veterinary certificate. A company exporting dry fruit or nuts, they need an agricultural license. A company exporting timber needs a phytosanitary certificate. All of them are going to add cost, time, and bureaucracy. Sadly, for the sporadic export, there is no worth doing that, so some companies are withdrawing some products from exportation, or they are deciding to bulk their shipments to minimize their costs. On the contrary, some companies are deciding to expand on the continent, and they are seeing it as an opportunity to open maybe a subsidiary or a branch in Europe. That brings with itself lots of bureaucracy and paperwork to complete. They need as well fiscal representation, and again, they need advice from professionals to do it in a correct manner. But there are lots of changes coming because of that.
So lots of changes that are being effectively forced upon businesses, and there's a debate which I'm sure we'll have subsequently about whether there was a sufficient amount of time for businesses to adapt to the specific terms of the withdrawal agreement, and then subsequently the free trade agreement that was agreed at the end of 2020. I just wonder, as businesses are having to adapt to the technical challenges, what kind of consequences are we likely to see in terms of the ability of UK-based and Liverpool City region businesses? What kind of consequences will they see and we see going forward as a result of this?
We are certainly seeing a change in the supply chains, partly because of origin and because companies want to get their products from either the UK or the European Union to get by the duty-free situation. Partly as well because of the pandemic. The shorter the supply chain, the less risk it is at the moment for goods to be arriving on time, and it also has an impact on their cost. Also, companies are revising their pricing structure. For example, all the extra paperwork required has to be absorbed at some end. It could be by the consumer, or it could be by themselves by cutting their profit. There are lots of challenges for companies. They really need to understand their product. They need to have a good cash flow situation, and they need to communicate at all times with their customers and with their staff to do it correctly.
At this point in time, for a lot of businesses who are continually trying to adapt both to the imposition of these technical challenges, but also looking ahead, strategizing for the future, understanding what those consequences mean to their business. It's probably now you've been an international trade advisor, now international trade manager for in excess of 20 years at Liverpool Chamber, so a huge amount of experience. It's arguably this is the most important period of time, isn't it, for businesses to get specific support to help them through this particular transition and position themselves for the future. So what kind of support is out there for businesses to access at the moment?
Yeah, there are various sources of support, specifically for Brexit-affected companies. There are customs grants available that companies can use for training, for recruitment, for understanding the processes of customs declarations. They're open until June, and they are processed through PwC. It's very easy to go into the website and put customs grants gov.uk, and companies can understand how to apply for them. Quite a few of our members have benefited for the three different eligible items. Also, DIT has funded workshops to help upskill staff, especially companies trading online or using e-commerce. Also for companies trying to grow their international activity with 2 full-day workshops at no charge. No doubt that the international trade advisors can let companies know about it. Also, there is an internationalization fund, also by DIT. ITAs can advise companies on how to access it. Different labs have different level of support and percentage of support, but it's definitely well worth exploring. And last but not least, Liverpool Chamber is still delivering new markets too. This is an ERDF-funded program that gives 35% funding up to a limit of £10,000 grant for companies for different activities that can be internationalization their website, or translation, or registering patents, or finding out about IP, paying consultancy work for that. And of course, when travel starts, it will fund traveling overseas and attendance to exhibitions and trade fairs. So have a look for all these different pots of funding, because they are definitely of interest.
Thanks, Elena. Obviously, huge implications for businesses and a wealth of support available, both from the Chamber and other partners. And of course, some of the panel members who have joining us today have either provided advice themselves or have been seeking support, guidance and advice to try and campaign for improvements for the conditions that they or their sector or their clients are now experiencing as they try and adapt to the new trading environment. So let me introduce members of the panel, please. I'd like to introduce Graham Bond from RSM, Andy Dougherty from Adlib, and Andy Jones from MSIF. Gents, it'd be fantastic if you could just give us an introduction to yourselves, your job role, and maybe give us some insight into your involvement in international trade or those of your clients, and just some initial thoughts about Brexit and what it means for you and the businesses that you operate or serve. Could we start with Graham? Perhaps we could start with you, please.
Morning, my name's Graham Bond. I'm the Office Managing Partner for RSM's Liverpool and Chester offices. Just by way of background, RSM is a leading provider of audit, tax and consulting services on a global basis. We operate in over 120 countries. We've got over 48,000 staff. So I'm working with largely mid-market international businesses. So international trade has impacted our clients. It's been interesting over the last few years since the referendum, largely trying to prepare clients for the ultimate exit. I think in terms of, yes, as already been mentioned about, in terms of there's a withdrawal agreement and it's actually impacting goods and services, it's the paperwork that comes with it. Thankfully, of course, there's, and it's already been mentioned about, UK or EU origin goods, but all the paperwork that goes with it, and that's what we've been helping our clients with. Certainly, the other point that was raised a bit earlier was about the structuring. So it might be the case that in the past few years, we've assisted our clients setting up overseas operations in the EU to actually help them trade abroad.
Thanks, Graham. That's really helpful insight. Now this is where it gets tricky, because there's literally two Andys on the call. So let's go in alphabetical order. So let's go with Andy Dougherty first, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Dougherty. I'm the Managing Director of Adlib Audio, which is a company I started way back in 1984, which obviously was a great year because Everton won the FA Cup. And in my younger Adlib years, I was fortunate enough to travel most of the world on numerous occasions with various different bands as a front of house sound engineer. In the more recent years, probably the last 10 years, my role has been very much about nurturing new talent into the business, whether that be as technicians or as part and parcel of our management structure here. And I'm very proud to say that Adlib is now, from its audio department, probably it is in fact the largest independent audio company in the UK. And I'm proud of the fact that we've managed to keep that in Liverpool. Pre-COVID, we were up to 167 full-time staff, and we were using up to 200 freelancers at any given moment in time. What the company does is basically we supply sound, lighting, video, rigging equipment to the events industry, covering all different types of events. We also supply all the technicians and engineers who will basically design, operate and fit out all those services. Works we'll have done locally that you may have seen or may be aware of are things like the Giants, which was obviously a huge event in Liverpool City Centre where we did the audio on that. Other events are things not so obvious but incredibly technical, believe it or not, was the netball event at the arena, where we supplied everything from the camera systems, the lighting, the audio, and tying that together with broadcast was actually very, very complex. And I don't think there's a massive understanding as to how complex and the technologies that are now involved in this particular sector. One of the other things that I've been involved with, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, is from 2014, the International Business Festival, which grew last year into being the Good Business Festival, which was also a very interesting challenge. We also have a specialist installations department, which basically uses a lot of imported kit that's fitted up and down the country. But our main sort of European business is based around main touring work. So I had a quick look at who we would have had out over these few months at the beginning of this year. And just the American artists we would have had at this moment in time would have included the Pussycat Dolls, Snoop Dogg, Bon Iver, Bob Dylan was about to go out again. If you're into your blues, a gentleman by the name of Joe Bonamassa. And they're just the American artists. And just for a bit of sort of context, the UK production industry is regarded as probably the best in the world. So when any of the US, Canadian, Australian artists coming over to the UK, to Europe in general, they will always use UK companies to deliver that service throughout Europe. So from our point of view, the UK is set up to serve Europe, and a lot of money is earned by the UK from what this sector has done in Europe over the years. At the moment, we see that where we sit, it's a kind of no deal Brexit for us, because ultimately how we've toured in the past is now finished and over because of all the new cabotage rules that are in place, which basically means that a tour in Europe could be anything from one truck to one bus to 50 trucks, all full of equipment, and 200, 300, 400 staff, and up to 2, 3, 4 months, whatever that period of time may be. And now we have these cabotage rules, which basically mean a vehicle can leave the UK, it can go into Europe, it has to be back in 7 days, and it can only do 2 drops, which basically means this sector and its massive amount of European business is pretty much over. So that's one of the biggest effects knocking us moving forward. And I think the next 12 months is basically going to be chaos trying to sort this out. I think that'll do for now.
Thanks, Andy. I'm pretty sure we'll revisit some of those points as we get into the discussion as well. And of course, it's been great over the last few weeks to speak to you, offline about some of these challenges that you and the industry are facing. And bringing Andy Jones from MSIF, please. Andy, if you'd just like to provide some opening thoughts, please.
Absolutely, yeah. Good morning, everyone, and Paul, thanks for the opportunity of being involved. My role at MSIF is I provide funding opportunities for SMEs in the city region and wider Northwest, up to about 250,000, although MSIF itself is able to provide funding at smaller levels, but also equity funding up to about 2 million if that's what people are looking for. I've been with the company for 6 years. Previous career is mainly within business funding and business support, which included 10 years working at an organisation some of you might remember called Business Link, which is now effectively the latter-day growth hubs that we all know and use as our gateway into all of the business support that's available. MSIF has been around over 25 years. We can support businesses at all stages of their life, whether it's pre-start through to established companies, and we can help companies across all sectors. One or two exceptions to that, but I'll leave that there. As an SME ourselves, we're uniquely placed to understand the many challenges that businesses face, and we're part of the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, which the government has set out to support companies through the current pandemic. Our funding, I would say, is wide-ranging, and we're able to support businesses with plans to grow, expand, perhaps into new markets overseas, and we've partnered up with the likes of the Combined Authority locally, the British Business Bank centrally, and Responsible Finance, putting together some relevant funding solutions to meet objectives that companies locally are telling us they're looking for. I think one of the key things that we do is our personalised approach, which has probably never been more important than during the current situations, whereby somebody's got a named contact and somebody they can actually speak to, pick the phone up to, and talk about their issues at the moment. So it's certainly something that we pride ourselves on doing so. And we obviously make a point of getting very close to the management team of every business we work with, so that we can use our network of contacts to work alongside us for the benefit of that business, which obviously brings us neatly into what we're talking about today. If we're unable to assist the business, we work closely with the Liverpool City Region's Finance Hub, which is a free-to-access independent finance raising team, experienced people who can look at the whole of the finance provider market and help a business to make suitable approaches, as well as assisting with financial forecasting. Talking about our involvement in international trade, some of the things that Elena has already talked about this morning are some of the challenges that we've been receiving from our portfolio of customers. Obviously, the transition's been causing some different details across sectors and different issues as well. We see our role in that as being the first port of call for people to kind of talk to, and then obviously from our perspective, we engage with the partners and friends and colleagues who know what they're talking about in this respect, because we don't. So it's important for us to have the networks and partners ready to hand for us to be able to refer to, and obviously that includes the Chambers of Commerce, the Growth Company, and other partner organisations as well. From a finance perspective, as I've mentioned, we can provide options and solutions that can potentially provide a business with the funding they need to look at international trade. It can be a specific piece of machinery that's required, or support for additional stocking imports, or even setting up overseas offices, which we have done for companies of ours who've set up satellite offices in the US. For example, our Flexible Growth Fund, which is something we do in partnership with the Combined Authority, helps businesses to fund capital projects that would not only provide opportunities to export, but also provide additional revenues and job creation that benefits the region as a whole. The key for us is understanding what a business is trying to achieve and being able to provide the solution in terms of funding that best suits those needs, or if not, an introduction to a relevant partner, or more often than not, is both in this case. Brief thoughts for the year ahead. At the moment, we would suggest that the pandemic has created more issues for businesses than perhaps Brexit. I think we would suggest that businesses have been putting off spend on growth, expansion perhaps, and just simply concentrating on staying in business. The government support schemes, the furlough schemes, the bounce back, the Sybil scheme, is encouraging businesses to raise extremely cheap loan funds to help them to cover overheads while revenues are affected. But obviously this is going to change, and all the positive things that we're hearing from Monday of this week, businesses are going to start spending and investing, and so are us as individuals. So I think as an organisation, we've got to be ready when that happens. And we will obviously be looking forward to a much more positive second half of 2021. And I suppose the key message to finish off with is it's important that a partnership is achieved with the local authorities and the local chambers of commerce and the experts in fields, so we can support businesses in the best way we can.
Thanks very much, Andy. We'll pick up on some of the points around where international trade may fit in that sort of investment strategy for the city region and for some of your portfolio holders in a little while. I'd really like to introduce Sean as well from Sutcliffe, Sean Keys. Thanks for joining us, Sean. I'm just asking all panellists to introduce themselves and just give some thoughts about the impact of Brexit and what it means for your organisation and maybe your peers in your sector and your customers as well.
Right, thank you very much for that, Paul. My name's Sean Keys. I'm the Managing Director of Sutcliffe Engineers, Surveyors and Geotechnical Environmental Specialists. We're predominantly based in the northwest of England, but we move around the UK. And I'm going to have a slight bias towards the construction sector, which is the area that I'm currently heavily involved in. What I've found, I think it's been slightly picked up by the other panelists, is that there's obviously bigger things come into play. And there was talk in our sector that Brexit may have a 3, 4, 5% impact on the construction economy. With everything that's gone on with COVID, that's been completely lost. So in terms of the actual financial impact of COVID within the construction sector, it's really, really difficult, if not impossible, probably not to smarter people, but it's really difficult to actually assess what impact that has had in the short term and is likely to have in the medium term, because the COVID crisis has been a bigger impact on the construction sector. We, I believe, are a good barometer of what's happening in the construction sector. We work in healthcare, education, retail, hospitality, housing, both private and public. So we actually see how the market is changing. And what we've obviously all realised is that obviously retail and hospitality have struggled this period, nothing to do with Brexit, but the other sectors have remained quite strong. So I'm going to give a strong message today that contractors are actually used to ordering materials from Central Europe. They're used to lead-in periods. So if somebody's ordering a particular product from should we say, Belgium, and it's taken 2 or 3 days longer, they're actually, construction sector is quite good at planning that process. So we've not experienced many first-hand problems around the Brexit problem in terms of materials coming through the ports, because typically people have planned reasonably well for that. I'm seeing an opportunity in this. There's some of the products that have been a bit slower have been some of the basic materials such as plasters and plaster products and brick products, but we've had problems with that before, so it's a planned problem. Some of the opportunities I foresee is that we've seen there's been a bit of a bounce in the industrial sector and probably the storage sector. So there's been a huge demand for storage. And for me in the construction sector, that means people are likely to build industrial sheds. So whilst that's a problem for somebody who's actually maybe transporting and moving those materials, for somebody in the construction sector who designs the sheds, or a contractor who maybe builds the sheds, or somebody who's fabricating the steelwork to go in the sheds, there is an opportunity. So we are seeing those opportunities. We've seen a slight bounce in that industrial sector directly around the Brexit element of it. So it's slowed things down. People are using more materials locally, so there will be opportunities, and we are actually seeing them come to fruition. We've had a couple more, I say, industrial projects come through the door, particularly in recent months. One of the downsides, and it's a very peculiar downside we've seen, is there's a slight lack of competition. So we found that particularly in the insurance sector, we are a part of a world economy, and insurance was being managed certainly throughout Europe. So with a combination of Brexit and Grenfell, and now with this Brexit situation, certain European insurers are pulling out of the markets. So it's actually really difficult to get sort of bonds, and it's really difficult to get insurance, PI insurance, and those are going up. So certainly the issue around bonds has affected clients, so they're not getting security with the projects. And certainly PI insurance, even if you've had a successful record, we've got a very successful record. The price of the insurances, as honestly, a friend of mine said to me, his PI insurance doubled recently because it's the worst time to try and negotiate. So there are issues around that. Putting that to one side, I think it was Andy from MSIF suggested, I'm predicting that we're going to see a bounce in the third quarter of this year. Last year, the economy dropped by 10%. This year, it's predicted, I think, 4.5%, and next year, 5%. So from where we are now to the end of the year, we're anticipating a 4.5%, 5% increase in the GDP for the UK. Construction sector is moving backwards. So I'm seeing the second part of this year being a strong move, and I'm seeing the effect of Brexit potentially slowing the economy down as particularly small, and there are other advantages and other opportunities to be taken. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Sean. That's brilliant. Yeah, you mentioned about bonds being a problem. We'll bring Graham Bond now for to see if he can live up to that tag. Graham, you've talked earlier about some of the advisory services that you've been providing in the run up to Brexit. How do you respond to some of the points that Sean has made there in terms of the opportunities that are available? I'm thinking also around will we see an economic bounce, and what the businesses actually need to do to make sure they're adapting to some of the changes that need to be made to capitalise on those opportunities.
It's interesting what Sean said. It is, of course, right, and a number of the panelists have already mentioned about the fact that the pandemic, almost Brexit, has come in under the radar. Our global economist, because RSM have a global economist, and we were chatting about it the other week, is, as has already been mentioned, we expect there's a whole pile of pent-up demand at this moment in time, which will mean that the second half of the year will be a real big bounce back. I think the V, not the V shape, but the V for vaccine will help. And of course, actually for 2022, that again we're looking at probably a 7% rate of growth, which actually is unheard of in recent times. I think bringing it back to the Brexit point, and I think that Andy, talking about from a services point of view, we concentrated very much on the goods and the goods side of things, but services is the issue, or because it's almost like a no deal for services organisations, and that's the challenge. And it's about structuring the business going forward to actually manage that. But if you're flipping it the other way, we've noticed also that there's been real opportunities from Brexit. I read recently about, specifically to do with Liverpool City region, the docks are, of course, hiring people because, the transport is actually, or shipping is actually moving to Liverpool rather than the southern-based ports. And therefore, it's actually bringing it direct to the north rather than via the southern-based ports. So that's an opportunity, and that's a potential growth in the area. I think that and this sounds, we're going to have to get used to the paperwork, certainly on the good side. But I think if you're best in class, people will come to you regardless. I think the investment we probably see is in advanced manufacturing and food production, because of course what's going to happen is it's more going about resourcing in the UK, and therefore the investment needs to be here, which is a lot different to previous. But I think, Paul, it's going to be a challenge, and I really, in terms of service sector, from our point of view, we're global, we're European, and therefore we have offices round, and we can refer on. But for Andy's business, where it's actually been people coming into the UK to use our services to then export into Europe, that is a real challenge.
Andy, should we pick some of that up, because you've articulated earlier about some of the challenges that the sector as a whole, and particularly in terms of production in mainland Europe post Brexit. In terms of, you talked about chaos in the months ahead potentially. Just wondering if we can maybe find some order amidst the chaos. How do you think that the sector and organisations like yourself and those who are part of the We Make Events group, for example, how do they make the adaptations and the improvements, and to be best in class, which, as you've said, a lot of our industry is already considered best in class in your sector. So how do they make those changes swiftly enough to be able to be competitive on that international market?
Well, I think there's two very distinct things. You've got the people and the visas, the work permits that are going to be required. And as the lady pointed out at the beginning, you've got 27 different countries, all of which have got different rules. So, for example, at the minute, France looks like it's going to be quite easy for visas and work permits for people, but Spain is going to be a nightmare. And that's one element. And I do believe, like a lot of things, so for example, in our sector, it was only about 5 or 6 years ago, Sean will probably be aware of this, that our sector was run from a health and safety point of view by the CDM regulations, which has always been a building contractor's set of regulations to run your health and safety by. And it was such a drama in our world. And then basically 6 months later, you work out how to operate it, you get the right paperwork in place, and it becomes something that you do, but is no longer a problem. I feel a lot of the Brexit stuff will be that. There'll be 6 months of total drama around a load of paperwork, which will eventually settle down. The issue that we have is coming to the whole transport element of things. The UK trucking companies are as specialist as the audio companies, the lighting companies, the video companies, the special effects companies. The trucks we use are all air suspension, mega cube, which means that you can get the maximum amounts of equipment in it. It's not a standard articulated truck. The drivers are used to the irregular driving hours, but within the driving laws. The companies know where to fly out a double driver for a particular thing. Not many European companies are actually doing this kind of work. And the problem that we have is that to go into it's what we're allowed to do. Currently, we're allowed to go into Europe for 7 days and come back. We can't, the business cannot, so there's nothing we can do because it's the law. We can't break the law. So our sector, until such time as the government look at all this and actually go back to Europe, and I do believe dialogue will happen, because I don't believe this sector, with the amount of money that actually it does generate, it's a 70 billion sector between artists and arts and supply chain and everything that goes into it. And I think, the fishing sector was 0.9 billion or something like that. I think at the beginning of all this, it was the arts and it makes us all feel good, and isn't that nice? And I think as things have gone on a little bit longer, it's like, it's the arts, it makes us feel good, but oh my God, I didn't realize it contributed that much to the finance of this country. So I do believe that it's something that's been completely overlooked at the Brexit stage that will be reviewed hopefully sooner. I mean, we obviously can't do anything till COVID's out the way. And COVID for me has, COVID is a moment in time, whereas Brexit's for life. So we have got huge problems regarding international trading moving forward. The other stuff that we deal with internationally, where we buy product in or we sell product on, yeah, it's a bit more paperwork and a few more taxes, and I get that. I'm sort of resigned to that already. But the touring element of it, the knock-on effect for this country will be massive, because all the companies in the UK that are now supplying Europe, if they can't supply Europe, will either wind up having a massive dogfight for the amount of work that is available in the UK, or may disappear, or in some cases may actually have to set up some European offices. But it's how that's going to be worked and how that's going to be looked at by the Europeans, because obviously the European companies doing what we do are going to see this as a bonanza time. So for me, the next 6 months is going to be a lot of questions and answers. It's very difficult to make predictions around Europe. So obviously, from a business point of view, we're looking at how we can capitalize on other elements of our business within the UK, because I think that is going to be guaranteed. And I do agree with the boom. You know, we're seeing it from our installations in the construction side of things. We've never been so busy in that department. We've got huge installations happening from the Hulls of Cherpeau down in Cornwall through to big installations happening, big lighting installation that we're doing at the Falkirk Wheel. So we are seeing a lot of money going into that side of things. Unfortunately for us, that's the narrow margin and it's not the biggest part of the business. But yeah, going back to the European thing, I don't think that anyone can actually make any predictions at this moment in time because we don't know what's going to happen.
There seems to be a little bit of a point there, Andy, about, you know, yes, the sector and the individuals and the businesses within that sector can make as many improvements and adaptations as they possibly can. But in terms of Europe as being a continual point of opportunity, there are some structural things that need to change to enable that to actually happen, such as, you know, the 7-day limit on touring, for example. There's some fundamental things and interventions required by governments in the UK and the European Union to actually enable all of the things that the sector can do themselves to actually mean something to maintain continuity in European trade.
Oh, absolutely, because if it's not in place, that market will simply not exist because you can't do it. If you can't deliver it, you can't deliver it. So I don't believe it will wind up being that bad, but that's exactly as it sits at this moment in time.
Sean, if I can come back to you, you talked about some of the opportunities. You talked about you know, like the storage, for example, and inevitably in your sector, there is almost this perpetual sense of change and adaptation to legislation and, I suppose, the macroeconomic environment. Are you picking up any sort of groundswell of movement around organisations adapting to some of the opportunities that you've said about at this point in time, or is there more of a wait and see approach?
We had that little period last year, probably in the second quarter from March to maybe June, where things did slow a touch. But I think people have now decided to move. And the opportunities for me, sometimes it depends what sector you're in. Sometimes you can be lucky or unlucky. So if you've been in a difficult sector, but the opportunities around, if you make, Freeport came up in the discussions then, and Liverpool, we're at the front. So whatever opportunity is there, you take it. So Liverpool has got a fantastic port. And what will happen if as the port becomes more successful, the 10 streets will become more successful. Hopefully, the new Goodison ground will happen. If the new Goodison ground happens, then people will build hotels and people will want to live in apartments. So as things become more successful and opportunities in areas change, then if you follow the positive opportunity, then there will be a real likelihood that that's the area that you want to invest in. If it's in an associated industry that's actually changed, then that has to change. So I think from a business perspective, businesses are always looking for their next opportunity. So we will be pursuing the next opportunity. And I said probably the Freeport, and particularly around the Freeport, there'll be transportation issues. So there'll be new roads, there'll be new infrastructure, and that will require buildings to be demolished and buildings to be changed. So I see opportunity. When I was a youngster, I studied economics, and my teacher said to me that even in tough times, there's always somebody who makes the most of that opportunity and makes money out of it. And I see that this is an opportunity that we're not going to change it. We need to grasp it and go for anything that's positive and make it work to our best advantage.
I'm going to bring Elena back in at this point, if I may. So, you know, thinking about the concept of Liverpool as a global city, and you know the opportunities around new markets for organisations to trade in. From your perspective, Elena, speaking to different businesses and you know, having been supporting businesses for 2 decades now, what do you think will be the opportunities for Liverpool and the new markets that are available to it? Where should Liverpool companies potentially be looking for that global marketplace?
Well, I certainly agree with Sean in the fact that the Freeport is an opportunity opening many doors to businesses. Quite a few of our freight and logistics companies are certainly looking at the developments and what's the outcome of the Liverpool bid for that. I think certainly we have to make the most of our strengths in quite a few of our business, like manufacturing, life sciences, IT, around the logistics and the port sector. Welcome really overseas visitors, foreign students, and become more like an outward-looking region. We have to be open for business. We have to make people outside realize the potential of business. I remain optimistic in spite of the economic landscape at the moment, and it is easy to see the scale of challenges ahead, but I think businesses are adapting at the moment, and they are really trying to understand what they have to do to improve and navigate trade around the difficulties and challenges. The free port is obviously an opportunity that remains like a positive outcome to be seen.
Thanks, Elena. Andy Jones, from an investment perspective, if Liverpool is going to achieve this position as a global city, it's clear that its business base has to have the opportunities to adapt, to sustain themselves on the back of what has been a pretty traumatic period of time for a lot of organisations, but also have that available capital and financial incentive and effectively that pump priming to enable it to go and explore some of the opportunities that Elena has alluded to there. From your perspective, what are some of the things that needs to happen to enable organisations maybe looking at growing their own businesses either domestically or overseas? What should they be doing now to make themselves investment ready?
I think as much as anything else, Paul, it's obviously knowing a business has got strengths, it's got opportunities, it's got things it's not so good at, and obviously there are threats from outside, which we're talking about Brexit being one, and obviously COVID is one that we're all living through at the moment. So I think from what we've seen and what we've talked to our portfolio about is making sure that the core business that people are actually generating revenue from is still there. And obviously that's where some of the government support schemes through COVID, for example, have helped businesses to do that. But I think as Sean has rightly identified, opportunities are there, and I think we're all thinking that the coming months are going to be the time when people are going to be looking to expand and to grow and to seek opportunities in new markets or in new ways. We've got examples of customers of ours who basically have had to close, obviously, for a number of months under the restrictions that we're currently under, but have obviously been able to look at different ways of generating revenue, which is important. So I think it's to understand what support is out there to help people, and obviously using those either free to access support or the support of the professional services organisations to make sure that a business is best prepared, and that can be with the financial planning aspects of it, or the research that they need to do, the marketing that they will need to do in terms of identifying new products and services, but obviously just getting geared up ready to jump on this potential boom that we've used a word we've used a couple of times, which hopefully is just around the corner for everybody.
And Andy, as a follow-up question, do you feel that the appetite will be there from funders to actually take a chance and take those risks on businesses seeking growth, or is there a danger that Brexit and to some extent COVID will actually have an impact where there's maybe less appetite to take risks?
At this precise moment, Paul, risk is probably underlined about 10 times as a word that funders use. Because obviously, there's inherent stuff going on. Never mind normal business kind of risks that people, have to mitigate as best as possible. I think it'll come down to obviously the support from government for the time being. Obviously, if there's going to be some time to, keep us all kind of trying to move forward, there's going to have to be some government support in that. Not every business has been able to seek opportunities straight away. Some have just literally had to batten down the hatches and just make sure they've got a future. And obviously that's had a knock-on effect with the funders. It's going to come down, I think, to looking at the right type of funding and the right funder in terms of the perhaps a little bit of the alternative market might come through a little bit more rather than the institutions. I think the banks have obviously been providing an awful lot of the bounce back loans and the funding, and obviously the billions of pounds that have gone into businesses. So it's a case of looking a little bit further afield and a little bit wider. And obviously, as far as MSIF is concerned, we're always looking at opportunities to provide different types of funding that are relevant to the current marketplace. So I think it's just a case of surrounding yourself with good people, good advisors to a business, and then obviously going in with it together.
Thanks, Andy. Graham, I might just bring you in here, please. If we take the notion that there is, despite everything, there is a finite amount of money and investment available for organisations in Liverpool. Understanding your particular specialism and focus within your role is on health and life sciences, so I appreciate you've got an element of bias here. But Liverpool as a city and a city region, how should it be building its post-Brexit future to establish itself as or to maintain its status and develop its ongoing status as an international city? Where should it be putting some of that money?
So if I may just mention, because of course COVID, the pandemic has been a real shock to the economy, but I saw some numbers recently to say that Liverpool has actually been been more resilient, not largely resilient. We all know from a tourism and hospitality point of view, it's a fantastic place to come to. But of course, in the last 12 months, that's been a challenge. I think, though, where the resilience has been is actually in some of the businesses that we do have in the region, in the city region, particularly in chemicals and pharmaceuticals. And you mentioned one of my other roles is I head up life sciences for RSM nationally. And it sounds flippant to say, I'm not saying they've never had it so good, but of course it's the area where there's a lot of investment which has been put in. So I think that, Liverpool as a city region, we need to shout about what we actually do have currently. We've got a fantastic port, and I think commenting and really supporting what has already been said in terms of the Liverpool, the Freeport bid, that can only be another opportunity. And actually, we've always been international in our outlook. We've always looked out as opposed to in, and we just need to continue with that. So I think the investment in the hopefully Freeport, certainly the investment in probably some of the businesses we do have already, but the challenge, and I don't know whether you're going to touch on it, whether we've got time, is skills. But it's actually about getting people into the city. Once they come into the city region, they stay.
Skills is a critical thing, and I'd like to bring Andy Dougherty in at this point, because I know there's particular challenges in this post-Brexit. If I say that was seamless, that wasn't it, Andy? So some of the challenges, not my first time this. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about some of those challenges that you face in your industry at the moment? It's partially caused by Brexit, partially caused by COVID, but there's some very real skills challenges, aren't there, for you and your peers?
Oh, absolutely. I think from our perspective, from a general public point of view, I don't think the public really know what we do. So when they go to a show, all the equipment that does what it does is either, in their mind, owned by the artist or owned by the venue. Whereas that bit that's in the middle between the artist and the venue, there is probably a sector that's bigger than both that's actually delivering that. And the industry has changed dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years, whereby these days you definitely need to be some form of ologist to be involved in this sector. And you've also got to be slightly mad to be able to do the hours that you want to do, but it becomes a way of life as opposed to just the job. And, I've been lucky enough to have been in it as long as I've been in it, and it's been, a great job to be in. However, moving forward, the skill set is very narrow, and all the people who have been in it, of which we had shortages anyway, by the way, prior to all this. And as Paul knows, I've been heavily sort of wrapped up with a lot of the educational establishments trying to assist in getting better information into youngsters prior to them coming into the industry, or any industry for that matter. But that's ongoing. But at this moment in time, all the technicians that we will need, because when COVID comes back, although I'm very concerned about Europe, there will be a boom. 80% of people who've bought tickets for shows that have been cancelled have maintained those tickets because they're desperate to be entertained. So because of that, you know, our sector is completely about mass gatherings, and as we're all aware, none of them are allowed. So people are resourceful in our industry, and they've all gone off and done other jobs and other work. We had to let 55 of our team go early in this, which was a horrific experience. I spoke to a couple of them recently to see where they were, and because they were as friendly, hardworking, knowledgeable as they were, they went in literally to building site jobs as labourers. Now they're running jobs, they're running teams, they're running sites because of their mentality and because employers have looked at them and gone, these guys are great. The opportunity they've been given there now means they're probably not coming back into this industry because we haven't got as much money in this sector. You've got people who are supporting families driving vans for Amazon, working in shops, in Tesco's, whatever it may be. And until such time as they can see that the industry is back to the way it was, i.e. 72% of this sector are freelancers. And most of those freelancers could have worked as many days as they wanted. They chose pretty much. But now, if it only comes back in a dribble, they're not going to come back because they've still got to support their family. So for us to, when this comes back, we are unique at Adlib in the fact that we employ so many of our own technicians. But as I said at the very beginning, at any one given moment in time, we can have up to 200 freelancers involved. And when we get back in, and remember at the minute, there's still provisos around the 21st of June for our sector. It was stated that they haven't looked at indoor stuff yet, so we don't know when arena touring is going to be happening. It will be reviewed, and large-scale outdoor events will be looked at more closely. So, you know, Reading and Leeds being announced is great, but will it get there? There's still a journey to go on that. So we've got grey areas there as well still. But when it does eventually come back, the people we need will not be available in the job centre. And the shortages are going to be absolutely huge in that sector. So although I believe there's going to be a lot of work there, it's going to be a journey and a half to tempt some of the people who have moved out of the industry back into it. And the skill sets coming from the colleges and the unis, you can't throw these people, you know, they spend 3 years with us after college and uni prior to them actually, if you like, being allowed out to go and do the work. So we're going to have huge, huge problems with the skill sector moving forward.
Thanks, Andy. I just bring Sean in, just be on skills, because obviously we've done a little bit of stuff, and I know how passionate Sean is about skills. And from the sounds of it, you guys are partially responsible for some of Andy's problems. They're all going off and getting jobs in your sector. We've talked offline previously about skills, and it's an integral part of the future of Liverpool and that export of talent as well. Just from your perspective in your sector. What about skills for the future? How can skills really start to drive global Liverpool?
I'll link this back with Brexit. We always traditionally in the past got a couple of Europeans coming over to work for us, which was fantastic for the culture of the business, and he brought a little bit of energy. Surprisingly, the second that, or not surprisingly, the second that we decided that we wanted to come out of Europe and Brexit came in, we got virtually no new applications from non-Europeans who wanted to come to Liverpool. So that's a problem, but then there lies an opportunity, which is what we've talked about. We need to recruit and train more skilled teenagers and young 20-year-olds to come into our industry. So there's a huge opportunity. Construction pays above average wages, engineering pays above average wages, and we need to encourage the next generation of youngsters to come into it. So we've been around sort of Hubert College, we've been at University of Liverpool, we've gone to different schools to try and encourage either more young guys or particularly women. We want more women in our industry and people from other sort of different backgrounds. We want more of them to come into this industry. That's a well-paid industry that you can have a full career in the industry. But I think the one thing we're particularly seeing as a problem is training. As I said, a lot of the youngsters, if they're strong in IT and they can use software and computers, then they're probably thinking, oh, we'll go and become game designers, which is equally in itself an amazing job. but those skills are completely transferable to being an engineer or an architect or a surveyor, completely transferable. And I think, as Andy was saying about the guys in the music industry, they build stuff. They're really well organized people. So you can see why many of the contractors want those people. And so people who are organized, we need them in our industry. So I think we need to encourage the youngsters, and there's a definite job for all of us on the panel, and including you, Paul, to get some of those youngsters and encourage them to come into the construction industry to either become a trade or a professional. And I say most important thing is that they're above average wages and an exceptionally interesting and rewarding career.
Fantastic, Sean. Thank you so much. And I think we'll draw the session to a close there, because I think it's such a positive outlook. Opportunity undoubtedly is essential to capitalise on as a Liverpool City region. We've talked this morning about some of the short-term challenges facing businesses, but we recognise, I think all of us, that the economic recovery of our city region is fully dependent on us adapting to the trading conditions we find ourselves in, sustaining our businesses, and particularly those fantastic asset-based businesses that we have here in the city region, and making sure that there's an aligned approach to investment, capacity building and quality of our talent and our organisations for the future. I'd just like to thank you all on the panel for your contributions today. It's been really, really excellent. And of course, my thanks to Elena, our International Trade Manager, who can now get back to servicing the challenges that businesses are facing, the multiple challenges they're facing as they adapt to Brexit and Brexit conditions. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope you found it useful, and considerable thanks once again to MSP, who have done a fantastic job hosting us here today. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.